So I hope you've been learning to do lots of things on Craft Curiosity, and in particular with knitting. And one of the things I hope that at this point that you've learned how to do is a ribbed cast on, so that you can cast on into your ribbed pattern, a rib stitch, which is in this particular sample, 1x1 knitting, and then now a ribbed cast off, which I'm about to show you. So let's get that started. So basically in a ribbed cast off, instead of just casting off using the same kind of knitted stitch going across, you actually just follow your stitch pattern and cast off. And this particular piece is 10 stitches in a 1x1 pattern, which started with a knit stitch and then a purl, knit, purl, knit, purl. So this last stitch on here is a purl stitch. So what I'm going to do to bind off is I'm going to start by going behind the yarn here and going from back to front and creating a purl stitch. Which I know doesn't look like very much, nothing exciting yet, right? So I'm going to bring my yarn to the back, and then I'm going to do a knit stitch because that's my pattern. But here's where we stop. I now have 2 stitches on my needle, and I want to make sure I keep that down to 1. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the first stitch that I put on the second needle. It's the back stitch, the one furthest away from the point. I'm going to come in here with my first needle, scoop that up, and I want to just bring it over the top of the other stitch. Now, the stitch that I'm working on is directly attached to that working yarn here. So I use that tensioning here to make sure it doesn't go anywhere, it doesn't fall off the needle. Now I'm back to a purl stitch, so I need to bring my yarn forward, purl that next stitch, and here's the transitionary part. Now I want to bring this stitch back over the top of this, but I'm actually going to do it from the back side. So I'm just going to come in here and bring that, and I use a little tension here on that working yarn to hold that loop down on the needle, and I'm just going to bring that over the top, and I still have that 1 stitch on the needle. Now I'm going to transition again because my next stitch is a purl stitch, and I can tell that because I have that soft loop coming up, and the last stitch is going to be another soft loop. So my yarn comes to the back, I knit that stitch, and I come grab that loop from the front and bring it over the top. Now I'm going to purl. I bring my yarn forward, and just so you can see this example really well, the purl stitch, I always know I'm doing a purl because I see the little bump right here. That's right up next to my loop on the needle. So I always know that's a purl stitch. So I'm going to purl into that stitch, and then come over here to the back, grab that loop, use a little tension here to hold that loop down, and bring it over the needle. Bring my yarn back because I'm knitting again, and bring my stitch over. Now if this were a 2x2 knit, for example, and this next row was another knit stitch, then I would knit into that stitch and work it in a knit manner. So you just follow the pattern that you have. It can be 1x1, it can be 2x2, it can be 3x1, it really doesn't matter, just make sure you follow it. So the next stitch I have here is a purl. So we purl that stitch, come in from the back, grab that loop and bring it over the top. Bring my yarn back, knit, take that stitch and bring it over the top. Bring my yarn forward, we're going to purl. Come back here to this loop, grab it from the back, bring it over, and the very last one is a knit stitch. Come to the front and bring this over. Now I have 1 stitch left on the needle, so when you get down to 1 stitch, just grab a pair of scissors, snip that yarn, and then use your needle if you want, but draw the end of the yarn up through your loop, and that will secure it. And that's how you can bind off. And then you can use just a large needle and take this yarn and bring it back through your work to hide it, to bury it in there. So that is the ribbed cast on, a rib pattern with a ribbed cast off. And it does stay in this pattern. When I see the regular bind offs, they tend to face forward just a little bit, kind of turn, and the ribbed one tends to stand up straight, so the top of the stitch is really at the top. I don't know if you can see that. So it just lays a little bit differently and has a little of that give that you want to have with this whole piece. There you are.